Okay, I think we've got it. So I certainly hope we do as well. I'm going to, if you're on and you want to check out your sidebar there, you have an opportunity and a place where you can post questions, engage, ask me kind of anything that you'd like to ask. So there's a live chat feature. So feel free to use the live chat feature. So I'm just double checking to make sure that everything is working. And it is, because it wouldn't be the first time that I've been on here live and then only to find out later that it actually wasn't working. So I'm watching the live chat feature. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me anything that you would like about what I am talking about. So here's the thing. One of the things that I am doing is, with Tanya Uncensored, is really talking about our emotional health. So our emotions are really the key to everything. When I first got started in mindset work, I was really using my head a lot, but I wasn't really thinking about the emotions. And one of the things that I really learned is that even though we may feel like we've dealt with an issue, oftentimes, a lot of the times it's actually trapped in our body or in our emotional, in, let's say, our emotional memory. So we may intellectually understand what is going on, but emotionally, oftentimes there are blocks. And those blocks can really be a big key to really understanding, what it is that we need to understand when it comes to why we don't have the results that we want. So what we want to be able to focus on when it comes to our emotional health is identifying our emotional patterning, identifying, the particular things that are going on emotionally. So when I got started on this journey, I was really focused in what was going on in here, which is an extremely important part. We definitely need to make sure that our thoughts, that the thoughts that we're thinking are healthy thoughts. But what I started to find was, when I was only focusing on my mindset, I was really trying to brush over a lot of what was going on when it came to like my emotions. So if I was having a down day, negative feelings, and I was like terrified that I was going to, attract into my awareness or into my everyday life something that is going, basically something that is going to be negative, that I don't want to attract in, because that's really what the mindset world was really teaching me at the time. And I felt really bad that I couldn't always think positive. It was like, you're supposed to think positive all the time. And I started to realize, but we have a range of human emotions. And what really triggered this was, I was having a conversation one day with a friend of mine who had a loss in her family. And, she was very adamant that she didn't want to, be down, and that she was really like working to keep herself and the family up, in this particular instance. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, there is a time to be sad too. There is a time to grieve. There is a time to be angry, to be justifiably so. And what I started to realize was, that there has to be another way. There has to be, something that we're missing here, essentially. And what I really started to look at was, our emotional patterning is just as important as our mindset, and that we can think certain things, but then what happens when we start to live in fear of feeling? Now, as someone who had been emotionally numb most of my life and had never felt anything, this was a whole new scope for me. And it wasn't something that was really easy, because of having experienced childhood trauma and various other traumas in my life. I was very emotionally shut down. So the mindset and the positive thinking was definitely a place that I felt more comfortable and felt safer. But I knew that I had to deal with the emotional side of things. And as I started to really deal with the emotional side of things, things got really worse for me. And then I started to find that I was experiencing massive periods of depression, periods of downtime where I just really couldn't seem to get up. Everything that I wanted to create, I couldn't really seem to create. It was like all of a sudden my mojo got up and like left, and my emotional set point was like really tanked. And I didn't know how to be this person because I'd always been the person who just, whatever was going on, I could push it aside and just really kind of, dive in and do what needed to be done. So I was really struggling in this new phase of things. But at the same time, I knew it was an important part of my journey, and that, I was feeling everything that I had not felt for basically my entire life. So there were times that, I was being really taken off guard by the things that were coming up to me and memories that were surfacing. Oftentimes, I was doing some healing work that was stirring up things that were actually trapped in my body that I had no actual remembering. Like, I didn't actually remember the events happening until I had emotional body healing sessions where those things, I guess, were being released from my physical body. And so then they came into my awareness. So then, facing a lot of things that, when we bury things and we push it down and we don't deal with it, when we face those things and those things actually start to come up for us, it can be very overwhelming. And I found that I started to really think really negatively about myself because, all of my mindset and my positive thinking work wasn't working. It was like every day I was like practicing positive thinking. It's like, just find the best in this situation, just, like anything that you could do. But then there were times that it was like, I don't want to find something good in this situation. I want to be mad and I want to be upset and I want to be all those things. And I realized on that journey that I had to allow myself to feel that, to feel the anger that I'd never expressed, certainly not in a healthy way. To feel all of the things that I felt, the hurt, the pain, all of the things that I felt, in various things, whether it was ended, like relationships that ended, friendships that ended, financial distress that, I'd ever refused to look at, business failings, all of these things, feeling let down, feeling disconnected, all of the things that I'd never really let myself feel. And what I was really afraid of in feeling those things was, what if I'm not better? What if I like fall into this victim trap and I can't get out of it? But as I let myself process the things that were processed, now I want you to realize that this isn't just sobbing and sitting in my chair every day, kind of, doing the crying. I mean, that was a part of it as well. But the mindset stuff that I had learned, I was actually putting to work. The coaching that I had taken, all of the things that I had learned, I was actually putting into work of reframing and repatterning the experience. So it wasn't just a full processing. It was a processing of allowing myself to feel and experience what I had experienced in life, to feel the things and release them from both my mental and my emotional as well as my physical body, to let that experience go and then reframe it. Then I could find the blessing in it. Then I could find the why behind it. Then I could reframe it, repattern it. So it wasn't just a process of, just crying, like I spilt my milk, because when we get stuck in that place of just being the victim and just crying over our thing, we can get stuck in that story. It can become the poor, poor, pitiful me. It can become, look what happened to me. But in reality, every single thing that happens in our lives can happen for us if we allow it to. So I had all of that knowledge, but the problem is why I was staying stuck was because emotionally I had never actually released the charge. So when things would happen, I would be triggered by people, by places, by words, by phrases, by all sorts of things. And by allowing myself to tap in emotionally and figure out what was really going on, where those triggers were, I was able to get to the root of the problem and weed it out. And most oftentimes I found that the root of the problem wasn't actually what I thought it was. So let's say, as an example, my weight. So very often I would worry a lot about how I looked. Most of my life I battled eating disorders, disordered eating, all kinds of things. And then when I started to really heal that from being in the fitness industry, I learned how to eat properly, how to exercise, how to take care of my body. And I really felt like I had a good handle on those emotions. But then, 5, 6, 7 years later, my business was really struggling. It was failing. I was pulling 120-hour weeks. I was exhausted. I was drained. And then all of a sudden, I started to get my disordered eating back. So about a year or so after that kind of, my disordered eating, because I say like I was afraid to eat certain foods. I was controlling and restricting in ways that were a little bit sneakier, because in the past I kind of knew that I had a problem. At this time I was convincing myself that I wasn't like that. I didn't have a problem, that this was healthy. When I really faced that down and realized that, okay, you know what, like I'm not doing so well, like with my food, I've really got to figure this out. What's going on? How did I get back here again? So when I figured out that I was back here again, I had to do that work to realize, well, how did I get this eating? Why do I have an eating disorder in the first place? It's far more than just about my looks and my weight, because in reality, I hadn't actually gained any weight. I was probably the smallest that I'd ever been. But my perception, of course, was something very different. So I had to really look at the roots of all of that stuff. And you know what all of that led back to? Now, I'm going to tell you, this wasn't a short journey, because as I went back in time, I had to deal with the question was, why do I have an eating disorder? And my answer was going through a lot of the emotional experiences that made me restrict and control my food. And that was ultimately the answer that I got, was when things are out of control, I control the only thing that I can. So it was a need for certainty that I was meeting through my eating disorder. So now I could ask the question, well, how could I better meet my need for certainty? And how could I have a better sense of certainty when things go chaotic? So that gives me the power to now change my relationship with food by finding something healthier in order to meet my need for certainty. But that doesn't change the fact that as I trace back, why I had the eating disorder was the need to control when things felt out of control. There was a lot of life experiences that led to that. There was a lot of releasing and healing and wounds that had to be healed. And that is from an emotional perspective. And so if we think about it like this, so my reaction is to restrict and control food. That is the problem, right? I see the problem as my eating disorder, but that is a symptom of the problem. That is a manifestation of the problem. And the real problem is I didn't like to be out of control. So that is the work a lot of the times that I help people with, is the very work that I'm kind of walking you through on this, which is something that is a little bit different than what we're actually able to see when it comes to this emotional set point. So for most of us, we have an emotional home, which is where we go when things happen, when things get chaotic, when things, we always have this place that we go back to. For me, for a really long time, my emotional home was anger. I really wanted to be angry. I was angry and I would do anything to get there. I have this story that I tell oftentimes about, driving. And so I have 2 routes to go to the city from where I live. And I could take the highway, which guarantees that I'm going to get there because it's divided highway, double lanes. You can pull out and pass. There's nothing going to be in your way. I can be guaranteed I can be there in 25, 30 minutes, depending on where I'm going. There is what we call the lower road, which is, goes to like a smaller town. And then I could connect and go to the city from there. It's going to take a little bit longer because it's the lower road, single lanes, the traffic is driving slower and things like that. So I oftentimes, if I had errands to run or things like that, I would run to the lower road if I had a few things to pick up. Now, the reality is the lower road often took longer because you get behind traffic. But in my mind, I would always go there. I'd be like, oh, it's closer, but it's not really closer. It was just, I was driving a lower speed. So I asked myself one day, why would I do this to myself? Why would I actually intentionally go the lower road when I'm going to get behind people sometimes doing 20 and 30 under the speed limit and I want to get there and I have things to do? Why would I keep going this route? And my answer became, well, why I keep going the route is because I want to be mad. I wanted to be angry, and that was the easiest and fastest way to get angry. And then I would revert into coping skills like smoking or eating or things that were unhealthy, because when I got angry, I needed something to get me out of there. Then what happened was, so that got me back to my emotional home, but I would flip between anger and self-pity. So then after I would eat or smoke, then I would fall into this state of poor, why can't I get anything right? The self-hate cycle, all of this. And then that didn't feel good. So then I would bounce and rebound back into anger. What's the fastest way? Go back to the lower road, or do something that is going to actually anger me. Now, consciously, this doesn't make any sense, right? And it's not until we bring things into our conscious mind that we have the ability to change them. Most of us have so many subconscious patterns that we have no idea even where to start sometimes. And one of the things that I like to ask people when you know that you need to start somewhere is to ask yourself, what is this main problem that I'm having? For most people that I work with, it's weight, and their careers, and their emotional state. Is kind of where I get a lot of people. I mean, and we cross over, and I help people with relationship work, and with money and things like that as well. But kind of the top three reasons that people mostly come to talk to me is because they want to lose weight, or they're extremely unhealthy, or they're really kind of fed up with battling, and thinking and talking and feeling about their weight. So that's one of the number one things. And the second one is their feelings. Like, people come to me because they, read my things, my writing on my Tanya Uncensored blog. They read things that I've published in the Elephant Journal, and they connect with that in the understanding that, wait a minute, like, how I feel is my biggest problem. Like, our inability to control our emotions, so to speak, our emotional mastery is really not in a good place. And certainly, and I laugh about this because I have a bit of a twisted sense of humor, and I laugh about inappropriate things a lot of the times. So when I think about, that's why it's called Tanya Uncensored, is when I think about, how ludicrous it is. I would be so enraged driving behind people who were slow, like they were intentionally ruining my day. But the only person who was intentionally ruining my day was me, by actually going that route. If I had somewhere that I wanted to be, like, and I needed, like, if I'm working on a time frame and I want nobody to be in my way, then obviously the sane choice to take is the highway. But the highway and getting to my destination on time and getting my errands run and then coming back and getting back to work didn't meet my need to be angry. And then that didn't put me into a cycle that then allowed me to eat or smoke, which was my two top coping tools, coping mechanisms. They weren't real good coping skills, but they were how I coped, and mitigating the damage probably from, like, road rage, which I again laugh at, but road rage is not funny. And I wasn't one of these road ragey people who was like flipping people off or like, things like that. But I was just internalizing, like, why would people drive this slow? And the person's day I was running was my own. And ultimately what I uncovered was why I was doing that was to get me into the place where I could eat or smoke. And then that put me back into this place of self-pity, which allowed me to connect with myself. So I was meeting my need for certainty and connection. So this is everything we do for a reason. We meet our needs. So my emotional home, and getting to my emotional home, helped me meet my needs at a very high level. So only reason that I would change that is because I was unfulfilled. I didn't like how I felt, right? I knew that how I was feeling because of all the mindset and all the training and the courses that I did. Plus, like, who wants to be angry and pissed off all the time? Nobody. I miss the go-getter in me, the person who used to be able to get it all done, but I didn't want to be unfulfilled. I was so disconnected from my life and my relationships and the people in it that, I needed to find some level of balance. And that's what this work allowed me to do, is allowed me to find that place within me that allowed me to go after what I wanted, but still, really be able to connect in a way that I had never been able to connect before, because my emotions had all been shut down. And so while I was on this journey, I realized that we can't only do the mindset work, we have to actually be able to do the emotional work, and we have to do the physical, because all three, our mind and our emotions, or what I like to refer, our emotions to me are our soul connection. That helps us connect with who we really are. And physically, what we eat, how we take care of our body, all determines our mindset as well as our emotions. Our emotions determine what we put in our body as well as what's going on in our mindset, and our mindset determines our emotions as well as what we put in our body. So everything is interconnected. We can't do one without the other. I see so many people in the spiritual world who really connect on a soul level, and they really connect from a mindset perspective, but so many of them ignore their physical health. And what I always say is that, physically, if it's not going to take very long with what you feed yourself or how you take care of your physical body, with all of that stuff that's stored in there, of how you're going to end up impacting your emotions and your mindset. And the same goes. I could, really take care of my physical body, but not take care of my emotions or my mindset. And it's not going to take very long before all of that turns around and my physical body gets impacted. So we can't do one without the other. We have to find this way of balancing this triad of, mindset, emotions, and our body. So that's where I like to work in the mind, body, soul, because that really allows us this deeper connection and figuring out like things like our emotional home, our patterning, looking at the problem that we actually are dealing with and facing. So what is the biggest problem that you have in your life right now? Whatever that problem is, there is going to be a root cause. And most likely, the problem that you're dealing with is going to be a symptom or a manifestation of the actual problem. It's not the problem itself. Like my eating disorder wasn't the actual problem. That was a manifestation of the problem. The problem was that I didn't like feeling out of control and chaotic, and that became my coping mechanism when things felt out of control, is that I focused and controlled the only thing that I knew how to control, which was my food and my body. And then that ultimately threw my emotions off. But what I learned is that if I allowed myself to feel what I felt in the moment, and of course, when I first started doing this, I had decades worth of stuff that was inside of me. And some of that stuff still comes because I might get triggered today by something that happened, 20 years ago, or, a light bulb might go off and be like, oh, the reason that I have this pattern and this habit is because it started there. Now, that doesn't mean we want to stay in blame, but oftentimes for many of us, we need to clear out those old life experiences, repattern them so that they no longer trigger us and pull us down to get in the way. And many of us, we hear these phrases like, stop blaming this one and stop blaming anything outside of ourselves. And absolutely, because blaming anything outside of ourselves doesn't work, and it isn't going to work. But it's not as easy as that. That's what I uncovered, is that it's not actually as easy as just saying, don't go there, because for many people, it's subconscious. It's trapped in the body. It's trapped in the emotions. And so we can't stop that behavior, or we continue to recycle that behavior. You might be able to find some temporary motivation and lose the weight, save money, by changing jobs or relationships or things like that. But ultimately, we'll find that we recreate the same patterns. I mean, how many times have you found yourself back here again? And how many times have you thought to yourself, how the hell did I get back here again? I said that I would never, ever do this again, but yet here you are. And I've been there, and that's what made me really start to look at this. Within the fitness industry, I certainly noticed how many people lost and gained, lost and gained, lost and gained. In more than a decade in the fitness industry, certainly, I've over the years and things, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I gained and lost the same 10 or 15, 20 pounds. But in the fitness industry, today, I still notice some of the people that I trained 10 years ago have gained and lost 50, 60, 100 pounds, 7, 8, 10 times in this decade. That will tell you that the problem isn't weight loss. For most of us, we can lose the weight. We can't keep it off. So what happens that when we get so fed up, we'll go out, we might do something drastic, or we might just get fed up and be like, okay, that's it, I'm done. And we say, not another day will I live like this. And we make that decision. But why we end up a year down the road, or 2 years down the road, or 5 years down the road of recreating that same pattern is because most likely something triggers something that hasn't been dealt with for us. And then a trickle effect happens. And then all of a sudden you find slowly but surely you end up back right where you said that you would never go. And then you end up more into this self-loathing. Like, how did I let this happen? And then you shut down and check out. And then maybe next year you get that motivation and you get up and you do it all again. But the reason that the pattern and the cycle keeps happening is because until you have found the root of the problem and taken that root out, that cycle is going to keep continuing. And that is ultimately what I learned, is that, when we can do our mindset work, but when the emotions want to bubble up and come over, we need to give those emotions air. We need to let them teach us, because our emotional set point, our emotional home, will actually teach us. It's like, when I started to really look at like my anger of like when I was driving my car. I mean, it's not something that, I'm proud of. But when I started to really look at my anger when I was driving my car, I said, what is this really about? Help me see what this is really about. Show me what this is really about, because I started to talk inside to me. Show me what this is really about. And what I started to understand was when I asked better questions, I got better answers, which was, show me what this is about, was showing me that I wanted to be angry. And then I thought, why would I want to be angry? Oh, because I have a lot of things I'm actually really angry about that I've never dealt with. So when I allowed myself, gave myself permission to feel angry about the things that I actually felt angry about, but wouldn't allow up to the light, wouldn't allow out. And I did those in a safe place, through journaling, through working with coaches, and doing work that really allowed me to give myself permission to feel what I felt. But like I said, I didn't just leave it there. I didn't just vent it all out and leave it out there in space, because when we do that, I can guarantee you in 2 or 3 days, the same stuff is going to come back over and over again. So when we feel what we felt, we have to actually begin the process of reframing that and changing that story. So when I allowed myself to really let out the anger, then I could start to reframe and really understand, why I felt the way I felt, why things happened the way that they happened. Or oftentimes, we don't always have an understanding or a reason about why something happened. And it was about not what happened to me, but what was I now going to do about it? And by giving myself permission to feel the anger from decades ago that I had never allowed myself to feel, I was able to let go of all that other corresponding anger. And then anger no longer became my emotional home. I actually find it really difficult to get angry now. Like, I just don't feel anger the same way I did. I mean, when something happens, yes, that like angers me. But a lot of the times it's like it comes from a very different place now. It comes from a place of when I see something, it's more like that I really think is gross or disgusting from a human nature perspective, the cruelties in the world, the things like that we do. I don't even get that angry about that anymore. It's like I used to be so justifiably angry and jaded, but now I feel like, what can I do to change this? Because that's motivated and inspired action. When I see something now that I don't like, instead of, getting into this rage where all that I'm going to do is vent, but because I used to get into those rages and vent was because I had so much anger and so much feelings of, injustice that have been unprocessed. That's why I was being triggered by so many things in my outside world. And I was looking for ways to get that anger out of me because it was toxic inside. The problem was that I was angry at the wrong things. I needed to get angry at the right things and allow myself to experience and feel those emotions. Now I don't feel anger hardly at all anymore. And my emotional home has become a much more stable state. And now when I feel like anger, frustrated, or irritability or things like that, I'm like, what is going on? So I'll do some inner work and say, what is going on? What am I really feeling today? Oh, I'm feeling a little bit tired. Oh, I'm feeling not good enough, or I'm feeling challenged, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm feeling these things, and it's surfacing as this, but I'm able to deal with things more in the moment. And every now and then something does trigger from, something that is still buried. But when I first did this work, it was like coming out under the rubble. It was like someone, put a bomb under the house, and like just, all the walls that I had built emotionally and everything else kind of came crashing down. There was a lot of stuff, each interconnected to each other. And the more of it that I worked through, the more leveled off things became, and the more all of that started to actually, connect the dots, so to speak. So that is, a big part of the journey that I teach people is, emotions. And it's the irony of it is not lost on me, because, I've heard so many people say oftentimes that which we run from is the very thing that we should be running to. And emotions, it was like, I mean, this has got to be, I'm sure some of my friends and family are laughing that I actually teach emotional health right now, but it's no coincidence that I do, because emotional health was the biggest thing that I needed to learn, was identifying and understanding our emotions. And, so for a while there, I definitely got trapped in the victim mode, but I don't think I'd ever actually done that, at a younger age in the moment of these other things happening. I just always pretended that everything was fine and that nothing happened. And I would just put this blinders on and saw what I wanted to see, and anything I didn't want to deal with or didn't like, I just opened a drawer, put it in there, shoved it in. But all that inside of me was festering. And so for a while, I went down into the dumps while I was really dealing with this. And that was why I had to come up with a way to feel better, because I found that there was nothing that was really out there that was, or that I found. I'm not saying that it's not out there, but there's certainly nothing that I actually found that was really helping me get better. There was a lot of stuff that was helping me break it down a little bit more, but nothing that was truly helping me get better. So I formulated this 5-step formula that really allows myself and what I walk my clients through, which it really allows us to deal with the problem, find the truth of it, basically reframe the situation, and then find and create, new ways to take bigger action, basically what needs to come next. And that really allows us to emotionally break down what needs to be released, and then reframe, and then move through that. And so what ends up happening is that why our results really get impacted by our emotions is that because for many of us, let's say that like we'll use weight loss as an example and money. These are like two of the top things, right? Money and weight loss. So you're going to save money and you decide that like, okay, I've got to stop like wasting money. I've got to stop eating takeout. And that's going to also help you with weight anyway, right? Because you're like, you know what? Like I really need to like get it together because I'm going to like, eat better. I'm not going to spend money on takeout and I'm going to like cook and I'm going to do all my food prep at home. So you clear off your credit, you spend the time and you like work really hard and you clear off that credit card and you know, you're cooking at home and you're doing things and you're feeling really like really good about things. And then something happens, the car breaks down or, you know, something happens and then all of a sudden you go into this rage where you're like, you know, you can't win for losing and you can't get ahead. And no matter what you do, you end up back here again. Like everything always goes wrong and you go into that diatribe, right? I'm sure you know it. I know it well. I can't tell you how many times I went through it myself. And so then you start to think about this process of, you know, basically now what's happened is that you start to revert. How fast do you end up going out to the drive-thru? How fast do you end up saying like, who cares? It doesn't matter what you do anyway. You try to save and you can't. So now 6 months later, you wake up, you've got like 10 or 15 pounds on and your credit card's racked up again. You go, how did I get here again? Like what happened? I was doing so good. Oh, right. It was because no matter what you do, blah, 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 blah. You know, so then you stay stuck in that story. So here's the key. When that problem arises, what happened was it now triggered a ton of things that have not actually been dealt with. And so now you cycle right back into the very patterns that you were trying to break. It's human behavior. That's what I do. Human behavior. Understanding why we do what we do. And a lot of that for us details in our emotions and our emotional health. What could we have done differently in that emotional explosion when something went wrong? In that emotional explosion, I can guarantee you there was something that was there that if you knew the right questions to ask, if you were paying attention to what those emotions were actually there to teach you, you could have allowed yourself to get through it, vent through it, allow it all to come up, find the triggers, and then turn that story around. So then maybe 2 or 3 days, maybe you would have went out and ate takeout like once, and maybe in 2 or 3 days you might have ended up kind of going, and then you get calm, and then you can go back, right back to it. And now you've transformed that base layer. So now the next time something happens, you'll probably go through it again, but it will be less violent. It will be less intense. And then you'll find deeper and deeper layers of things that have not been dealt with. Different belief systems, different life experiences, all sorts of things. And then each time that something happens, you'll actually find that your reaction is totally different. So now when I drive the lower road, every now and then I'll get behind someone going super slow. And part of my almost instantaneous old conditioning every now and then comes up and it's like, oh, what? And then I'm like, wait a minute, it's okay. It's probably saving me from an accident down the road, or, you know, maybe the police are around the corner and I won't get that speeding ticket or something like that. So my auto conditioning has shifted so that every now and then I'm still triggered by something, but it's not as intense and it's faster for me to turn it around because that is what our emotional health can really do. And so now what happens is I don't get angry or into a rage. I don't go smoke and I don't go eat, keeping me on track with my health needs and my health goals. And then I go off and I still have a good day and I'm not triggered into, negative action. That is how our emotions really impact our results, is because so many things happen that we haven't dealt with, we haven't processed, we haven't reframed, and those trigger us into negative coping mechanisms or negative coping skills that we do that ultimately sabotage us, self-sabotage, and eventually takes us away from the very things that we wanted to create. We keep creating these cycles over and over and over again, and we will continue to create those cycles over and over again until the lessons are learned. And the lesson most of the time is that it has nothing to do with the actual problem. So while I was actually dealing with my anger, I would think that like my big problem was, nothing ever goes right. Nothing ever goes right. Nothing ever goes my way. Someone said, like, what's your biggest problem at the time? I probably would have said my weight, smoking, and my inability to quit that. But in reality, it was all of my emotional set points that was actually triggering anger from things that had never been dealt with and never been processed in my life. That is how our emotional health actually impacts our results. So I can guarantee you that whether it's your career, money, your weight, or any of these things, finding the root of the problem is the key to everything. So that is today's episode of Tanya Uncensored, as we talked a little bit about our emotional health. So next Monday, I will be back live again. You can make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Any questions that you have, I'll certainly ask, stay here for a minute or so. To answer any questions. I do see a comment that came in that said slow down. When I get really excited, I talk really fast, so my apologies. It will be something that I will definitely work on as I move forward on the Tanya Uncensored show. When I get excited about a topic, I do have a tendency to kind of get a little animated and talk really fast. So it's a challenge for me. But if you're watching the replay of this and you have any questions or comments, then feel free to leave them in there. You can certainly feel free to reach out to me at tanya@wildsouledwellness.com. I'll put these in the comments under the video so that you can reach out. And if you'd ever like to talk to me about how I might be able to help you solve your problems by helping you connect to your inner wild soul, and help you through the emotional process, you can certainly feel free to reach out to me to book a discovery call. And I am really excited to be doing the Tanya Uncensored show. Next week, we're going to have a brand new topic, so make sure that you click subscribe to the channel so that we can stay connected. And I'm really looking forward to the topics that we're going to talk about on here. I hope you have an absolutely amazing day. And I'm so, 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 so happy that, I get to spend whatever time that I can with you, whether it's live or on the replay. I'm always grateful for the time that we get to spend together. Have an